Heroes are not only on the battlefield. Heroes are people that lead by example, that care for other people, that go out their way to save people, to help people, to inspire people, to motivate people. You don't have to be in the military to be a hero. And sometimes we use the word hero too much.
The idea for this documentary originated in my grandparents' house. They were telling me about amazing veterans and former law enforcement officers that live right in their community. My name is Aidan Fridman. I'm an 18-year-old freshman at the University of North Florida studying digital video production. For the first part of our documentary, we asked our veterans, where did they come from? Who were they before they joined the force? And this is what they told us.
I was born in Rankin, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh, and I received a scholarship from the Army. I didn't choose it, it chose me, because when I was in the service, or in Duquesne University, when the sergeant came in and said, "We'll pay you while you're going to school," I went, "Yeah, put me in, coach, I'll do that." So right away, I was in Vietnam like 6 months after I graduated, and it was a real shock going from a college situation to one where somebody's shooting at you. We were the first unit that ended up in Vietnam. I spent 27 years in the Army, by the way, and I enjoyed each and every assignment that I had.
Yeah, before I became a pilot, I was born and raised right outside of Philadelphia. I knew I needed to do something. I needed to get out of there and find my own path in life, and became a Navy pilot. It was a dream.
I grew up in a suburb outside of Philadelphia, a little town called Glenside. Found out that I wasn't too bad of a swimmer, and in the evenings I was a swim coach at the Naval Academy, and that's where I actually got my interest in the service.
I was born in Pennsylvania, a coal mining town. My family was very conservative. There had been a male, at least one male in the Army since Gettysburg, each generation. So it was no doubt that I should enlist. As a 19-year-old, I was used to doing whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. And that came to a sudden stop the morning that basic training started.
I had a calling very early on in my life that I wanted to go into law enforcement. And I followed that, which lasted me for 44 years. It was an opportunity to not only do my career in law enforcement, but also see other parts of the world and broaden my experience in law enforcement. I applied for the organization and was hired and started my 24-year career with NCIS.
I spent 10 years in the military. I was a submarine officer stationed out of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and I served on board a Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine as the assistant weapons officer. My second career was my career in law enforcement. I missed being in service of others and wanted to put a uniform back on. It was a little too late in life to join the military again, so I decided law enforcement would be the best fit for me, and that's where I wound up.
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1954, October. It's a little bit of challenge being in Baltimore with racism and things like that. I thought the Marine Corps brought a very challenging atmosphere into my life, and it would make me a man. So I wanted to grow up and have that type of discipline and structure in my life.
I was born in Michigan. I'm the youngest of 6 boys, but I grew up in a very abusive household. All my brothers ran away from home when they were about 14, before their 14th birthday and everything, or they all went in the military. And I bet my brother once that I would never join the Army. I bet him $500 I'd never join the Army. So I decided to enlist in the United States Marine Corps. And my brother did pay me the $500 because I didn't enlist in the Army.
Korea back in the 60s was a very, very conservative country. I was half American. I looked different than the traditional Korean children. So going to school became a challenge. Koreans did not look favorably upon half-breeds. I had to fight essentially daily on the school grounds. I was adopted by the Dearborn family, who had children of their own. I embraced my American roots. I wanted to forget the negative experiences that I had living in the country of Korea. I felt a tremendous amount of indebtedness to this country because I was given U.S. citizenship, and that meant the world. And it was because of that I decided that I wanted to serve in the U.S. military.
After hearing about our veterans and former law enforcement officers' backstories, we wanted them to tell us about very impactful moments they had while out in the field. And this is what they shared with us.
My most memorable experience was when I landed on the aircraft carrier for my first time. And when I landed all by myself, my jet on the USS Lexington, that told me that I'm better than what I am. It told me that I can do things that I never thought I could do. So it gave me a little bit of self-esteem.
One of the best was leading men, leading young men and helping them grow. I was a drill instructor at one time, so that was one of my best highlights, being able to mold and help young men become Marines, understanding the culture, the background, and walk out as a Marine Corps.
I had the great fortune of having commanded 3 different ships, USS Tempest, USS Underwood, and USS Somerset. I feel incredibly privileged because when you serve as the commanding officer of these ships, you're in charge with both men and women who volunteered to serve under your charge. And that's a responsibility that I did not take lightly.
And I think probably the most amazing story were the Montagnards. These folks, they migrated hundreds of years ago from India, and they were treated very badly. One day we were visiting a Montagnard village and got around to 3 cigarettes later, got around to saying, "So what's going on around here? Are there any of the bad guys around?" And the interpreter asked him, and he came back, the interpreter said, "Yes, many." These folks count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and many. So we got out of there. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
I was exposed to elements around the world. I've been all over Asia, all over the Middle East. I've seen the conditions that people are forced to live into. I've seen children in the Philippines sitting under coconut trees waiting for a coconut to fall so they can get something to eat. And then in the Middle East, of course, I saw some horrific areas and times. But the people overall appreciated Americans and our way of life. And when we started building schools for them and provided opportunities for young girls to go to school for the first time in history, it was a new opportunity for them, and they were very welcoming and appreciative of it.
I was in a couple situations where my job was actually to run when I was being chased by the Vietnamese in their MiGs, and once in the Med I was being chased by the Algerian mercenaries. But that was my job, was to have them come chase me so fighters could go chase them.
I was wounded 5 different times. The one that really sent me back was something that exploded, and it was in the heat of battle. Who knows what happened, but my left leg swelled up. I spent, I guess about a week or so out in the forward base area. Then I went all the way back to Walter Reed Hospital. I was medically evacuated.
We had one instance when I was in charge of our office at Camp Pendleton where a wife was missing from the base. They could not find her. And to make a short story long, what happened was that her husband had entered into an extramarital affair with a co-worker, and he had killed his wife and had thrown his wife into a creek. And over a period of time, her body started showing up in people's yards, pieces of her body. So those are the kind of things that you would not normally believe would be happening, but you're dealing with humans, and you're dealing with human frailties. So those are probably one of the most memorable things I can recall in recent history.
There was one that always comes to mind. It was one of my very first, actually. We were involved in a high-speed pursuit with 2 homicide suspects. And during the pursuit, the suspects actually fired 33 rounds, and one of the officers was able to actually shoot through his windshield into the vehicle, struck one of the suspects. They crashed right outside an elementary school. The one suspect was shot and killed. The other suspect went up and actually tried to get into the elementary school while there were children inside there. So my dog Zeus and I were able to get there on the scene. I was able to send him to apprehend that suspect, an armed suspect, before he was actually able to make entry into the elementary school, which could have wound up very bad.
My worst experience, if you want to hear about it, I was on the Ford operating base. Fob Falcon is what it was called. And right across the street from our fob was a mosque. And right next to the mosque was a small diner. And the gentleman who ran the diner was the leader of the basically neighborhood watch. One day I was over there talking to him, and the son came home from school, and he ran inside, Mr. Jerry, and he ran inside his house, and he came running up to me, and it was a picture of a sailboat. And he was explaining to me that they learned it was a sailboat and had a green sail and had he's 12 years old. His name was Mahmoud. It was beautiful, and I tried to give it back to him. He goes, "No, Mr. Jerry, I drew that for you." He said, because before you came, because their family was not wealthy, he said, we didn't go to school. My children, my sisters were not allowed to go to school. And later on that night, it was a slow day, so there was not a lot of action going on. So my reports were short. We started hearing single gunshots across the street. What had happened is the father, the gentleman that I was talking to, the leader of the neighborhood watch, they gathered him, the insurgency gathered up, they dressed up as police, the Iraqi police. They kidnapped all these men, decapitated all 13 of these men in front of their children and their wives. And after the men were decapitated, they went down the line, shot each wife and each child in the back of the head with one bullet.
That is absolutely horrific. Last part of our documentary is we asked our veterans about courage. Who were their heroes? And this is what they told us.
The way I describe courage to people is like there would be several times where we'd be working a situation and all of a sudden gunfire would break out. And every police officer on scene would run towards the gunfire while all the citizens were running away from the gunfire. Basically, put your own safety aside to protect the safety of others.
Courage in Vietnam was everybody had your back. Like if the group of us had to go do whatever, they weren't going to do it as one, we were going to do it as a group. The infantry where I was, you want the guy on the left and the guy on the right to be strong so that when the time comes, you can count on them, that everybody had everybody's back. One guy would get wounded and somebody would help him immediately. The courage of the regular soldier, the guy who you never think, let's just say it's like ordinary people doing extraordinary stuff.
What it meant to me then and what it means to me now is being able to think fast on your feet, use common sense. You're going to be afraid. You can't let that fear rule your emotions or your life at that particular time because you want to survive. And so, it's an automatic thing. It takes over, and you do what you need to do to survive.
Courage is something that is within you that regardless of what the popular opinion may be, regardless of how difficult that decision is, courage is doing the right thing. And you know what that right thing is, and that you're willing to stand up, even if it is contrary to the popular opinion, to come to the aid or assistance to another individual, to stand up and doing the right thing. But most importantly, I think you have to have integrity and honesty. And what I mean by that, I'm going to put it into very simple terms. Doing the right things when no one is watching.
Everybody's scared, okay? But you're not scared to a point where, I can't do this. No, it was, we would help the next guy, help the other guy. The conviction that the folks had, I'd say 95% of the guys had a very positive attitude about what was going on, not negative. And that helps a lot in anything that we do.
Things that I did that I recall was getting a call to respond to, there was a riot, and this is following on the coattail of the assassination of Martin Luther King. My partner and I had our car firebombed inside our car as we were patrolling. And our window was probably open no more than 9 inches, hit the cage and landed between the seat that we were sitting on in the patrol car. And my foot got caught beneath the seat, so I was dragged probably 300 feet or so down the road before I was able to get loose from the car. The mind goes into slow motion. And what it felt like it lasted for an hour was probably a matter of seconds. But those things always stick to your brain, you'll never forget that. Situations can change dramatically, very quickly, in the blink of an eye. And the one that I remember every day of my life was March 31st of 2017. The call came out, it was an intoxicated person at an AA meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was causing a disturbance. So I showed up to make contact with the suspect, and without saying a word, he pulled out a loaded gun and pointed it at me. I was lucky, and I was trained well enough that I was able to defend myself and take him out before he took me out. And it just proves that you always have to be prepared for a dangerous situation like that. You never forget what you see, and you never forget what you experience. So I still have nightmares. I still have nights where I can't even sleep, or I'll just wake up in a cold sweat. So it's part of the job, whether you serve in the military, law enforcement, being a first responder, and you deal with it. You deal with it the best you can.
My last deployment, I was a psychological operations tactical team leader. I would go out and I would talk with people. I had 3 interpreters, and I wouldn't talk to them about the bad guys or the guns or anything like that. I would just talk to them about their life. And over time, I didn't have to ask questions. They came up to tell me things. They started talking to me a lot. So much so that people started coming from other parts of Iraq to the forward operating base that I was on with hand-drawn maps of enemy weapons placements and IEDs, explosives. And because of this, the insurgency was not too fond of me, and they put a hit out on me. And eventually they did catch up to me. And they triggered an IED, roadside bomb, basically evaporated the rear half of my vehicle. And after the explosion, there was a 57-minute long gunfight that took place. And before the gunfight was over, before they were able to get me out, I was shot 4 times, once in the right shoulder and 3 times in the right leg. I fractured my spine in 3 places. My breastplate ruptured my stomach. My gunner was blown from the top of the vehicle, and he's blown 25 meters away from the vehicle, about 75 feet. And when he landed, he shattered one of his legs, and he was stuck in the middle of the battlefield in the bushes, unable to walk. My driver was thrown from the vehicle. I sat in the right passenger seat. My driver was thrown from the vehicle, and again, because of the percussion of the blast, he was kind of in shock of where he was and what was going on. So he was walking around the battlefield for several minutes with his arms out because he had burns to his arms. Sitting behind me was the intelligence officer for the battalion I supported. The intelligence officer was my best friend within the battalion, one of my allies. He gave me all the support. He was one of the reasons I had the 3 interpreters that I did have. He was thrown from the vehicle, and he had very minimal damage to his body or his uniform. Sitting behind my driver was one of my security force members, one of my primary security detachment. He was actually my roommate, one of my soldiers, Sergeant Shakir guy. He took the brunt of the blast. They couldn't recover most of his body after the gunfight was over.
The bad guys had sometimes more firepower than we did. You're flat on the ground and you don't want to get up because bullets are flying over your head, and everybody's that way. And I, because I was an officer, was one of the first ones to get up and try to kick these guys in the butt and say, let's go, we got to go over here or we got to go over there.
My 3rd command was on board the USS Somerset. USS Somerset was named after United Flight 93. And of course, Flight 93, where the heroic actions of those 40 crew members, brought the plane down into Somerset County. Just imagine walking through the airport and randomly pick out 40 persons. And let's just say you are among one of the 40 that was chosen, and you were on that flight. Would you have had the courage to do the actions that they did, really, for the greater good? I mean, these are men and women from all walks of life. I only hope that if I am ever challenged in that situation, that I would also rise to the occasion and have the courage to do what they did.
A hero is a person that sacrifices everything they have to help someone else.
There were a number of people in the service that I'd say collectively were inspiring. They were the utmost professionals, and we were there to get a job done, and we did, and we knew the importance of our job. Lives were at stake. That's my inspiration, collectively, the people I worked with in the service.
In my platoon, 40 guys, 43 guys, they were heroes because they exposed themselves and with no fear at all to help other guys. They did extraordinary things. And these kids are just younger than I am, and they were very courageous.
I had two sisters get murdered, and they had kids, and my sister and her husband took most of the kids in, and they wanted to do that because they felt that I needed to go ahead with my military career. In my opinion, those people are heroes.
So for young people today, I think a problem that's happening is some of the people of my generation don't expect enough from you. You know, if we expected more from you and helped you get that and held you accountable for it and treated you fairly, then I would think you would be amazed at what you can do. Quite frankly, I think in today's world, we give you too many passes. It's like, oh, it's too hard. Okay, don't worry about it. Mom and Dad will take care of it. It isn't just the generation. It's the people before that generation, too, about the expectations they have of those people. You never give up, you know. No matter how many times you get knocked down, and you're always going to get knocked down. The only thing you can do is get back up. And I highly suggest to do it because it's amazing.
If you feel like you screwed up at 18 or whatever, or 19, and you know what? It's never too late.
You should also know that, you know, there's a cost to everything. The freedom that we enjoy today, the past generation paid the cost in a various way to secure that freedom for us. Because of the actions of people that have gone before us, afforded me the opportunity to not only come into this country, but to be educated, enjoy all of the services, the liberties that the Constitution afforded me to allow me to have served my country, enjoy the successes with support of a lot of good men and women under my charge to help me succeed. And it's because of that I wanted to continue to serve and have, so I could afford the future generation the same that was afforded to me.
Some folks are not really happy about the life we lead here. And I would suggest that they go to remote areas in South America or in sub-Saharan Africa, or even in around some of the desert regions, and they learn how important water is.
So we live in the best country in the world with a lot of freedoms that a lot of people fought and died for. And there's just something special about this country and living in a democracy where people have rights that they take for granted. If you look around the world, there are a lot of bad places with a lot of bad things going on. And we are so lucky and so blessed to live in a country where we have these freedoms and these rights that are given to us in our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and people ignore them and they don't appreciate them. But if you look around the world, we live in a very special place. There are brave men and women out there who are fighting to defend the country or to keep their communities safe or fighting fires. You know, there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good things, and people need to know about that and appreciate it.
I mean, if you're going to complain about something or going to stand up and protest, at least know what you're talking about, because there's too many people in our nation right now that'll go out and riot and protest about things they absolutely know nothing about. And I think that's unfortunate because, again, the information is available. If you want to protest, please do, but please understand what it is that you're discussing and protesting about.
You need to look at all the sources. Don't just believe the social media and TikTok, and do your research. Look at all the sources. Talk to people. Listen. You know, the best advice I say is that love this country. To even people might, oh, it's much greater, you know, other countries, it's so much better and all that. And that's not true at all. And certainly the opportunities that we have here far exceed other countries. Here, you have so many opportunities, and I don't think the young people understand that. And like I said, you're not sure what you're going to do at 18, 19, you barely got out of high school, you can turn around and make something of yourself and be proud.
And I admire the people who made all the sacrifices, because like many in the past, and like myself, I would like to leave a future that was better than the one that I inherited for my children and grandchildren. And I would hope that your generation also feels the same way. And do your part to make it better. I personally chose to serve in the military, but for the members of your generation, you could serve at all levels. You could serve at the community level, county level, state level, federal level. If you were to choose one of those pathways, I think you will find yourself rewarded personally through that experience. And I think it will also broaden your perspective and perhaps maybe even give yourself more clarity on what it is that is truly important to you and what you value and what you would like to do as you make decisions in the future to shape the world that your sons and daughters and your grandchildren will live in tomorrow. Everything that's been done over the last 248 years, which we just celebrated our independence, and it's not perfect. There were a lot of mistakes were made. There are a lot of mistakes that are being made right now. So it's an opportunity for your generation to learn from the decisions and actions of the past and what you would like to leave to your children and your grandchildren.